unfair start what you said when you said about not everyone can grow cannabis. You mean not everyone has ability to grow plants, not everyone,
yes.
but everyone is legally allowed to do it, right?
Yeah. Well,
okay,
there's 2 points. I did mean what you implied. Not everybody is capable of growing good cannabis. Most of us will grow very poor cannabis, actually. Most people are good with the vegetative stage, but when it comes to flowering, they make mistakes. They get powdery mildew, they get insects or bugs, or they don't give it enough nutrients and there's nothing to smoke. So a lot of people cannot grow good cannabis. If we were legal and could teach people in Canada, it is much more common now. Everyone knows how to grow cannabis because it is very widely discussed on social media, in every media. You can easily find out how to grow cannabis in Canada. You are allowed to grow 4 plants except in 2 provinces, Manitoba and Quebec, because the government in Canada is 3 levels: the city level, the provincial level, and the federal level, and they all have too much power. And at the federal level, they came up with many rules. And at the provincial level, they can impose their rules. And at the city level, they can impose their rules. So there are some cities, a big city like Mississauga and one like Oakville, they don't allow any legal stores in that city. No one can sell cannabis legally. So, of course, this encourages the black market, actually. It doesn't achieve anything useful. But the cities are allowed to opt out of the legal cannabis regime. At the provincial level, they can control the age of the people. So in Quebec, the Quebec provincial government refuses to allow people to grow 4 plants. You can legally grow 0 plants, no plants in Quebec, and you must be 21 or over to buy cannabis. In all the other places in Canada, you can be 19 years of age or older, 19 years of age, and you can legally acquire cannabis. Now, in Quebec, the courts have already struck down the limit on growing. The Supreme Court in Quebec said it is illegal for the Quebec government to prohibit a citizen from growing 4 plants. And this will probably be the case in Manitoba. So soon, we will have everyone in Canada being able to grow 4 plants minimum. Now, as you'll note, we still have to go to court for some things. I gave money to that court challenge that restricted people growing only 0 plants. And I knew that is probably illegal, so I contributed money to a lawyer, and the fellow went to court and he won. And now people in Quebec, which is like 13 million people, can now grow 4 plants. So you're still going to need to be activists, but it's very hard to be an activist when cannabis is considered legal by the public, because you can't hold a rally to change a regulation. Nobody will come to your rally to change a regulation. They will come to repeal a law or to get rid of a law or to legalize something proactive like legalization, or something reminding people of oppression like stop arresting us. You can have a rally, but you can't have a rally to say, let me sell pot because they excluded me. So the nature of the movement, the cannabis culture, changes after legalization. It's not nearly as much fun. You will miss prohibition in some ways because it allows us to meet and gather and share stories of oppression, which are fun and interesting, and they tell us a lot about the nature of our government. But when the government legalizes cannabis, it also tells us about the nature of our government. But now it's all about excessive regulation, too many bureaucrats, long times for delays in licenses. Everything requires a license. And whenever you have to get a license, it's not legal. It's still illegal. It's still prohibition with exceptions. So these exceptions are called licenses. And so generally, it's illegal to have more than 30 grams unless you have an exception. It's illegal to grow more than 4 plants unless you have an exception like a medical license or a commercial license. It's still illegal to carry cannabis in your car or vehicle unless it's in a government wrapper and it's out of view. So everything is still illegal, but everything has exceptions in law called licenses or permits or And the three levels of government have an input on all these things. So the nature of our culture changes from one of sharing cannabis that was grown with love and care and concern, and then we share it and say, this is good for your multiple sclerosis, or this is good to treat your cancer. In the legal shop I work in, I cannot say anything medical to people. I cannot tell them that it will help them for anything. I can only say how they could make a brownie or how they could make cannabis butter. But I cannot give any medical advice, despite the fact that I'm trained in Slovenia and through Canada on cannabis use with cancer, with multiple sclerosis, with many different diseases and pathogens. I'm very knowledgeable. But the law requires me to not talk about these things when I'm actually selling cannabis. So and that is one of the many restrictions and rules that you'll have to deal with. Your life becomes much more bureaucratic, much more rules and regulation. It's not nearly as much fun. You're going to collect more taxes, but you can smoke pot anywhere outside. You can grow 4 plants or many more with a medical license. You can work selling legal cannabis very easily, even with a criminal record. There are, in fact, chains, the Toke cannabis chain that I work at, and the Calyx, and there's another company that hires former prisoners, former convicts of medical laws. So there are some enlightened corporations who are hiring former activists who are now in the legal market. So you have to decide what you want, because you're going to get a lot you don't want, and then you will get some things you do want. And it's only a matter of constant pressure. People have to grow more pot. The only way to achieve any kind of political advancement is to put the pressure on them of growing a lot of pot. So in other words, the movement, the people in the culture have to continue to grow pot in defiance of the law, and as much of it as possible, because that's the only thing that puts pressure on police, is that the people if citizens do what they want, government dislikes that a great deal. They hate that because they're losing control. And as I started out the program, it's all about control. And when the government loses control, they resent it, and they do what's necessary to get control. So at first, that's arresting people, that's jailing people, that's punishing people. But then it doesn't work, because 10, 20, 30, 40 years of punishing people, and everybody is going to be growing more marijuana than ever. So then government bureaucrats and government politicians begin to think, well, how can we get the control back? And they discovered that by legalizing it in Canada, they get all the control back. So that's what's happening in the United States. Governments are welcoming legalization because it means more taxes, more control, more bureaucrats, more regulations, and government likes that. And so eventually they will appeal to their own self-interest. Government only listens to its own interests. Whatever is good for government is what you will get. So don't give them advice on legalization. They won't take it. Just tell them to stop arresting people. And for that matter, until they stop arresting people, you have to threaten that you will grow more pot than ever before. Year after year, you will grow more pot, and you will defy the law, and you will overgrow the government if they do not adapt to the changing times.
Wow, that's a lot of things to process about what you said. I think that's a very good point, that keeping this illegal, seeing how many people break the law to use it, that's basically just making fun of the government. Just legalize it and stop being made fun of. So yeah, that's something.
Well,
that's an argument. That's a good one.
It's not just making fun of. The reason I started a cannabis revolution by selling seeds, it's important that you sell a lot of seeds in Poland and plant a lot of cannabis. But I also wanted people to have money. The cannabis culture needs money. And so selling cannabis is a very noble thing, whether legal or in your case, whether it's illegal. We need to generate income for our people. So we need a vibrant commercial sector of one kind or another. We need people growing a lot of pot. We need people selling it. And we need people still talking, having dialogue. And we need our medicines. And we should continue to do all these things without any consideration, in Poland's case, to government. Here I am already in the legal industry. I'm already trapped. I have to obey all these rules, or I won't be allowed to be in the legal industry. But as for you, you are not in this situation. So you have to continue to do everything possible to enrich our culture until the government comes around and gives suitable regulations and suitable taxation to something that most people who are activists and citizens can live with. And to me, the best pressure is to simply tell them what you want. Very simply, though. Don't get complex. Don't start suggesting this much, we should be able to grow 5, 10 plants. The bureaucrats will do what they want. Tell them to stop arresting people for anything to do with cannabis, selling it, buying it, smoking it, growing it, whatever. Stop arresting us. And don't tell them how to regulate. Just let them do whatever they want, because if it's not good enough, you'll just keep breaking the law. And you'll keep breaking the regulations until it is good enough. But in Canada, we've reached that tipping point where the law actually is good enough. And it will soon dominate the entire scene, and there will be many legal shops and many legal growers and many legal medical growers and many legal consumers, because it's just working well enough that that's convincing people. That's the reduction in arrests in Canada is very, very significant. I suspect this year fewer than 5,000 people will be arrested for a variety of cannabis offenses, compared to 12 years ago when 80,000. That's like 16 times more people were arrested 11 years ago for cannabis a day. So arrests are going down. Access is continually improving. And there's probably research going on and all sorts of things going on. Eventually, Canada will become a leader with the United States in commercial cannabis production, distribution, research, medical. So Canada has a big head start. We are already exporting legal amounts to Poland and to Germany and to places around the world. So the government of Poland will soon become aware of this, and they will resent that they are missing opportunities. You will not need to tell them. Their bureaucrats will tell them. You need to protect access for the ordinary person. And you have to decide at what point the activists, are willing to compromise with the government and accept a system that is not perfect, but it's pretty good.
Wow, that's a lot to process, but a lot of questions popped up in my head. Yes. While you were speaking. I'd like to start with, because you mentioned some problems that Canada is still facing. For the other part of your what you said, it shows that you kind of have almost the perfect situation, something we should be looking at and trying to get to the point where you are at right now. But the question is, all those problems that are happening to Canada, like you're not advised to talk about medical cannabis in the dispensary, or there is no law regulating driving in Canada while you are a legal cannabis user. Do you think all those problems that you mentioned before are the reason that it's not perfect yet, and there's still a lot to work on, and you just have, in the world is in the perfect place yet? Or is it like it's already, this is what it is and it's very hard? There's no solution for this kind of problems. Do you think there's just still a lot to do in Canada, or?
Well, there's a lot to do at the regulatory level. Like, for example, if you still want to live your life any way you want, and it's illegal, you can still do that. And you may want to do that. We can't live in fear. We can't live as cowards. But we also have to be realistic, as there's a line in a movie, Chinatown, with Jack Nicholson, where he says we all have to swim in the same dirty water. It's an important lesson, because we are not going to achieve perfection. We don't live in utopias. And utopias aren't going to come. So everything is a matter of compromise. So the government, you just have to understand that the government will do what it wants, regardless of your input. When the government wrote the legislation to legalize cannabis, they did not listen to a single activist. I testified at all three levels, the city, the province, and the federal government. They did not take one single suggestion of any citizen. They only took suggestions from police, the bureaucrats, and big business. So you're never going to get listened to by the government, is what I'm telling you. It doesn't matter what your petition says. If you want to see something specific, what you need to tell them is to stop arresting people. Stop arresting people, stop jailing people, stop punishing people. But don't tell them about what legal regime they should do or how many plants you should be able to grow or, this kind of thing, because it will fall on deaf ears. They're not listening. The only thing you can get public sympathy for is arrests and jailings. People don't really care how the government makes you buy cannabis. People don't really care about how many plants you could grow, 10, 20, 30, or your medical reasons. That's just, it's too busy. In this time of COVID, we're all too desperate. Little details like that, the citizen is not concerned about. But they don't like people going to jail for growing plants. People know that's unjust and unfair. So we have to so we can get people to agree with us that we should stop arresting people for growing plants. And we should stop arresting people for giving cannabis to friends. And we should stop arresting people who are using cannabis as medicine. And we should stop arresting people who are growing plants in their backyard or in their home for their own use. And so we have a lot of things to get sympathy from. And we have a lot of political tools to do that. But we are not going to get sympathy from citizens about, oh, well, the shop should be 1,000 square feet, or it should be this size, or we should have only CBD there. That's all too confusing. So do not discuss that with government. They will not listen to you.
That's very interesting what you're saying, because that's basically the opposite of what we've been fighting for some time ago. Because when we had the total prohibition in Poland, and we had this window right now that is allowing prosecutors to not start the investigation if a person is possessing a little bit of cannabis for your own use. But for years, we only have in the bill that says a little bit.
Advertising that.
No one knows how much is a little bit. So people in different cities are arrested for different amount. For 5 grams in one city, you go to jail, and in another city, you are just going to go free. So this is the problem. We have this a little bit. We don't have it specified, as you said, that we should have. But it means this is kind of a window that a lot of people didn't go to jail for this.